Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 13th edition of Beyond the Data. Tonight we have as our special guest Kay Burdette. And right now, though, before I get into introducing her and all that, we're going to do a quick advertisement again. Last advertisement for the Let Freedom Ring event, which is going to happen next Saturday. If you want to get your tickets to this to see myself, Warner Mendenhall, Mitch Marcheski, and Beth LaFay, you have to get it by, I believe, this Saturday on the 15th. After that, they're not selling any more tickets. The money that comes from this is going to be used to support the lawsuits that have been popping up like mushrooms over the last month or so, I'd say. So again, they're running out of tickets. I don't know what they're down to. I do know the last time I heard, about a week ago, they were about 80% sold out. So get them quickly, I'd say. All right, so advertisement over, and we'll get to Kay. Now, Kay, you reached out to me, about a week and a half ago, telling me a little bit about your story. And when you told me the full story, I was just like, this is perfect. This is exactly what people need to hear, because we're sitting here today with the Supreme Court with their very confusing stay and unstaying, and it's a hot mess in terms of mandates that are coming down through businesses or not, or it's a mess. And we're all going to be dealing with this in the coming months, whatever the decisions end up being. And that is mandates as they come through our places of employment, mandates of all varieties. Now, your particular story specifically focused on mask mandates, because that's what was there before, but this is all very applicable to vaccine mandates as they come down. Because, of course, although the Supreme Court stayed the implementation of the OSHA mandate, there are a ton of businesses out there that are still going to continue on with their vaccine mandates, and we're going to be facing that, and unfortunately. And I just love the way that you dealt with the situation, because people like Warner are wonderful for after the fact kind of thing, but there aren't enough lawyers. They're just not. Even if every single lawyer in the state of Ohio was on our side fighting for us, there still wouldn't be enough lawyers to cover how much this is going. What we need are for normal, everyday people to take advantage of the systems that are in place to protect us in order to, work on our own behalf. And that's exactly what your story is all about. So without further ado, I mean, if you'd like to just kind of tell us the story of what happened to you in your job.
Sure. So my previous employer, I had been there for right around 7 years. And of course, back in 2020, when COVID hit, nobody was sure what to do or how to handle it. And so when it had first hit, they made it an option to work from home. I chose not to. I chose to come in the building every day. And it was really kind of great because half of the employees were working from home. So there was very few of us left in the building. So everything was very laxed, which was great. And come July 2020, when the Governor DeWine had made his statewide mask mandate, they, of course, had went through with that at work and made everybody start wearing a mask. My situation was a little bit different because I actually have a skin condition right around the sides of my head and even up into my scalp a little bit that gets very irritated. It's like dermatitis, basically eczema. And so I physically was not able to wear a mask. And so the day that they had announced it, I walked into my HR director's office and I could show her, listen, I can't physically wear a mask. This is why. And their response, it was her and another woman. Their response was, don't even worry about it. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Clearly you have a condition. Totally fine. Don't wear a mask. So everything was great. So it was around September or October of 2020. I get called into HR and they say, listen, some people have been complaining and saying that they're uncomfortable that you are walking around the building without a mask on. Could you maybe take a piece of paper and just hold it in front of your face as you walk through the building. So I'm like, sure. Yes, I can do that, because for the most part, I worked alone in a cubicle. I didn't have to leave if I didn't want to. I didn't even have to interact with other people really if I didn't want to. So it was really just if I walked to and from the bathroom, or maybe if I went down to the cafeteria to get a drink or something like that. So fine, I will carry around a piece of paper, and as my own little way to jab at the person who complained about me, I actually had an Ohio Stands Up brochure, and that was what I held in front of my face as I walked through the building. So I did that for several months, and in the end of May, when they had lifted the mask restriction in Ohio, we received an email saying those who present their vaccination cards to HR will no longer have to wear a mask in the building. So nothing really changed for me. I still carry around my Ohio Stands Up brochure and held it in front of my face when I went to the restroom or downstairs. And that was fine. And beginning of August, now this was before Biden had announced any OSHA mandates, anything like that. There weren't even rumors of mandating the shots. We had received an email stating that basically they were going to mandate that every employee be fully vaccinated, and they were giving everyone, get this, 10 days. They were giving us 10 days to be fully vaccinated. Now, even before that, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before they mandated the vaccine, November 2020, out of nowhere, we got an email saying, by the way, guys, we're mandating weekly testing. We're paying for it. It's a company that we've hired to come into the building. It's a finger prick test. And even when I heard that, I'm like, no.
Why? Whoa.
I'm not doing that. That is no.
And finger prick tests are, I mean, the only thing that you'd be doing with the finger prick test is an antibody test.
Yes.
Already just all sorts of levels of, no, this is the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah. And this was their solution, I guess, to making people feel better.
And did they have any kind of, I mean, if it's a finger prick test, that requires blood. Blood is this is not something you mess around with. They have to be certified. These have to be, there needs to be a system in place for safety purposes, not COVID, but
yes,
cleanliness, and there are other bloodborne pathogens out there that are truly a risk. And what did they just
they sprung it on us. We were given, I think it might have even been that same day that they started the testing.
Oh,
and myself and two other employees were completely outraged. And we basically said, we'll quit, we'll walk, we're not doing this. And so my supervisor at the time actually was able to get us a private meeting with our senior vice president of the company, along with our HR director. And it was myself, my supervisor, and another woman. So as we're waiting for the meeting to happen, which was maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes from the time we requested it, we decided, because they had given us this general release form that everyone was to sign to do the testing. And so we decided to do the research on this company a little bit. I honestly don't remember what the name of the company was, but we called them and just said, we're just curious. We Googled you, and it came up actually that it's not a medical testing company of any kind. It's not a lab. The company was not related to the healthcare at all. Mm-hmm. And so it turns out when we Googled them, they were a private investigating firm. And so we called them. And the one woman who called and said, I'm just curious how long you've been doing COVID testing. And they put her on hold, and then they hung up on her. And so we called back again. And this time we had more of a plan. We pretended to be a business that was thinking about hiring them to do testing for us. So that was the story that we gave them. And, we asked them what the price was, and they told us it was $75 a person. Now, our company had between 200 and 300 employees at that time. So $75 a person times, 200 to 300.
A week.
So a week, yes. So we asked them, how long have you been in this business doing the COVID testing? And their response was, about 4 to 6 weeks. Okay. So we got the information we wanted. We went down to have our meeting with the HR director and senior vice president. We went down there, all three of us, gung-ho. We're not doing it. I'm not going to cave in. We're not doing this testing. Absolutely not. We sit down, and the other two ladies basically said, well, we just have some questions. What are you going to be doing with our information? How is this process going to work? They explained all of that. And the other two were kind of like, okay, fine. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not doing this. And I said, this goes against all of my religious beliefs. You're violating my bodily autonomy. I'm not doing it. And as soon as I said the words, this violates my religious beliefs, all of a sudden it was, oh, okay, hold on. And they asked me, can you get us a religious exemption letter by tomorrow morning? And I said, done. I'll get it to you tomorrow morning. So I reached out to my pastor online at 7:00 in the evening because I needed to have this by the next day. And she was great about it. She said, yes, I will get it written for you. I will email it over to you. Just let me know who to address this to. So she did that. She sent it to me. So I went into work the next morning and I emailed it to the HR director and senior vice president. And as I'm waiting for a response, they start calling people down from my department to get tested. And now, mind you, my pastor, when she wrote me this exemption letter, and thank God she did it this way, at the time, there were no talks about the shots because it wasn't even available yet at this point. This is November 2020. She happened to put on there that my religious beliefs are that anything violating my bodily autonomy, because my body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, yada, yada. And she included testing of any kind and vaccination. So I am waiting, and more people from my aisle are being called down, and I'm starting to panic. And so I went on Teams and I'm messaging everybody saying, hey, have you happened to read my exemption letter? Is it accepted? Finally, I get a hold of our senior vice president who said, yes, we'll accept your exemption letter. You do not have to be tested. I was the only person out of between 200 and 300 employees who even fought the testing. So out of the whole time that they did the testing, which was from November 2020, they stopped in, I want to say April of 2021 is when they stopped it. I was the only person that had fought it. I was the only person who refused to do it. And I was ready to get fired then. I was ready to have to walk out on my job then. And so then everything went smoothly. May, they announced that if you present your vaccination card to HR, you'll no longer have to wear a mask in the building. And even those of us who weren't vaccinated, didn't present a card, we really never wore anything. I mean, I carried my paper around. I didn't hold it up anymore, And nothing was ever said. Things kind of went back to normal for a bit. And then all of a sudden, I believe it was August 3rd, we get an email saying that you have 10 days to be fully vaccinated. And they did say, we're accepting religious or medical exemptions. Please send them to HR by such and such a date. And they were requiring the religious exemptions to be signed by a member of clergy. I had already submitted my exemption previously, which had been approved, and it did say vaccination on it, and it said testing on it, and it was accepted. So at that point, I was not going to say anything. I wasn't going to bring it up to them if they weren't going to bring it up to me. So about a week goes by, and that 10 days is drawing nearer, and they called a company meeting in our cafeteria and said, okay, we'll give you until August 30th, whatever that Friday was, the last Friday in the month. And the reason they did that was because that was when they were hearing rumors of the Pfizer becoming FDA approved soon. So they gave everybody till the end of that month. And people, they wanted to know what our answer was going to be, basically whether or not we were going to take the shot or not, or whether we were going to enter an exemption. A lot of us just said, we're not answering. You've given us to the last Friday of the month. That is when you will find out our answer. So they kept sending out email after email. Hey, if you can let us know, that would be great. Then they started offering the $1,000 bonus to anyone who got the shot. So now they moved on to coercion and bribery. And the first few people who had submitted a religious exemption, from what I understand, when they submitted it in August, they were being denied. No reason given, just denied. One person that worked there actually had a family member who was an attorney somewhere in Cuyahoga County who kind of reached out to them and threatened them and said, listen, there are certain laws that you need to be abiding by. So then all of a sudden they started accepting all the religious exemptions. And on September 13th, I have my notes here. Um, they had sent out an email, or I had sent HR an email actually, because this had come up quite a bit and no one was able to get any answers. So I had emailed at HR asking if an employer were to choose to wait for one of the shots to become FDA approved, do they have that option to get an extension on that deadline? Or are you telling us that we're being forced to get the only one at that time that we thought was FDA approved? I got no response. So that was on September 13th. On September 15th, I got called into HR, and they remembered my exemption from the previous year and wanted to question me about it. And this meeting was with our HR director only. Now, let me preface this by saying from the very beginning, when I had my very first meeting with the senior vice president and HR director regarding the testing, the first thing I did was grab my cell phone. I have an app on there that records, and all I have to do is just tap my screen. I can make my screen go black, put my phone in my back pocket, and I walk down to that meeting. I have every single interaction that I had with anyone in that company, whether it was HR, the vice president, any meetings that I had, every single thing is recorded.
Which is legal in Ohio. All you need is one party to know that there's a recording going on. One party of the conversation needs to know. So if anybody's wondering, oh, can I do that? Is that legal? That kind of stuff. In Ohio, I don't know about other states, but in Ohio, only one party of the conversation needs to know. And so that can be you.
Yes. So I did record every single meeting conversation that I had with anyone. And so I get called into HR, I grab my phone, I hit record. And I walk in there and I sit down, and the HR director had basically said to me, you know, I know you submitted a religious exemption last year for the testing. And when I pulled it up, I realized that it also said the vaccination. And she said, so I need you to wear a mask. And I said, I cannot wear a mask. I have a medical condition. You know, we've discussed this. And I'm still not able to wear a mask. And so she said, well, then I need you to get tested. And I said, that goes against my religious beliefs. We've been over this. And she said, well, I need you to do one or the other. If you're not going to get the shot, I need you to do one or the other. And so I said, well, I'd be more than happy to bring you in an actual note from my doctor, if that would help. And she didn't really have much to say. And so I offered it again. And I said, if I were to bring you a note from my doctor explaining that I cannot wear a mask, then what would happen? And she sort of hesitated, and I could tell she didn't want to say it, but she said, then I have to honor it. And I said, okay, no problem. I will bring you a note from my doctor. I'll be more than happy. So I did. I brought her a note from my doctor, which my doctor is a chiropractor. So when I submitted that note, I got called in again. And during that first meeting that I had with her, I told her, because she was going on about how safe and effective the whole story there, the shots were, and how, you know, she would prefer that I just did that. And I said, you know, it's kind of funny because at this time last year, we were having the conversation about the testing. And one of the other ladies that was in that meeting with me had brought up, you know, one day we're going to be having the same conversation about you mandating the shot. And I said, and you laughed and said, no, that's totally different. That's putting something into your body. And I said, and here we are having this conversation now. And her reaction was, no, I would not have said that. And I said, well, actually you did, because I have it recorded. And I don't think I've ever seen the color drain from someone's face so quickly. And she said, oh, well, that's good to know. So you're recording these interactions. And I said, when I have to have a meeting with my employer over violating my bodily autonomy, absolutely, I'm recording it. And so I get called in a few days later. And now it's not only her. She has another woman who is not in HR sitting in there. And it's basically the two of them versus me. And they said, okay, well, we got your doctor's note, and they sort of laughed at it like, this is from a chiropractor. And I said, yeah, that's my doctor. And she said, well, do they treat you for your skin condition? And I said, I don't need to disclose what they treat me for. And she goes, I'm going to need you to bring in a letter from a real doctor. And I said, that is my real doctor. I said, they are my primary care. I go to the chiropractor anytime I have any issue. And so she still kind of laughed at the idea and said that she pretty much didn't think it was legitimate. They can't treat a skin condition. And so they then attempted to negotiate with me my religious beliefs and whether or not I will either consent to testing or give in to the masking or just get the shot. And the other lady that was not part of HR, who was brought in, she was getting very frustrated with me. She just wanted me to say yes to one of the three. And at that point,
one thing to bring up here as well. I mean, in the story that you told me as well before, I mean, the person that they chose did not have a job that was in any way, shape, or form related to HR. That person had nothing to do with you in general in your employment or anything like that. The one thing this person seemed to add to the situation from your description is physical size.
Yes.
Just a large, intimidating size.
Yes. Now you can't tell when I'm on camera here, but I am only 5 feet tall, so I'm pretty small. This woman that they brought in, who is not an HR member, she is probably 6 foot tall, very just large woman, you know, in every aspect. And so I do believe she was brought in to try and intimidate me into caving into one of the three options that they wanted me to do. And so they were trying to debate me on the mask issue. I think they thought that was the easiest way to get me to cave. And so I told them, I said, listen, I've gone on the EEOC website. I've investigated. I've learned what my rights are as an employee. Now, prior to this, it had never occurred to me that I would need to know any of this. But when I started realizing that they're doing things that are immoral, unethical, and I kept thinking, these can't possibly be legal for them to be doing this. And so that was when I started looking into things. They kept using key phrases like reasonable accommodation and undue hardship. And so I kept thinking, okay, these must be buzzwords. And so I Googled them and the EEOC website popped up and I said, great, this is where I need to be. And I am not kidding you when I say that I spent literally hours upon hours just reading and investigating to find out so I could confidently go in there and have these conversations with them and be able to explain to them that I know what my rights are and I know what your rights are as an employer. And the one thing that I had to my advantage, and I think a lot of us have to our advantage, and we don't even think about it like this, is that these employers, not only are these mandates and new policies new to us, they're new to them. You know, places like manufacturing companies or restaurants or retail, they've never had to have a situation where somebody was submitting a religious exemption for something because they've never had a policy in place where that might be necessary. It's very rare, you know, in circumstances where they would. And so I use that to my advantage because if I don't know a lot about it and you haven't been through this process before, then you probably don't know a whole lot about it either. So I use their ignorance to my advantage. And so I went in there and I started reciting different things from EEOC. And when they were trying to get me to cave into the mask, I said, well, you know what, a reasonable accommodation. And by the way, I did submit a doctor's note saying that I can't have anything in front of my face. Anything, but I'm willing to work with you so that I don't cause an undue hardship. And I will continue to walk around the building with a paper in front of my face. And you know what they said to me? They said, Kay, that paper doesn't do anything.
Oh, really?
And so I said, oh, well, this was my previous reasonable accommodation. So I don't understand why it couldn't still be my accommodation. And so it kind of became this battle between myself and our HR department. I kept getting called into these meetings at, you know, sporadically in the middle of the day. And they really kept trying to push me to cave into the mask or cave into the testing. And so it got down to the point where I had a binder put together where I quoted different sections of the EEOC website. And at the time, and they still have it on there, but it's not as good as it was when I had to do this. But they have a specific section on EEOC.gov that covers COVID and COVID in the workplace and accommodations and exemptions and things of that nature. And so what I was doing was I was copy and pasting the little blurbs that I found to be useful and beneficial to myself. And I would put that on, you know, in a Word document with the link right below included. So that way they could find exactly where I found it on the website and show that I'm not taking it out of context. And so I put things on there about discrimination and how you cannot discriminate against somebody for their religious beliefs. And then I also put on there, it explains very detailed on eeoc.gov that you cannot retaliate. So if I were to submit this religious exemption, you can't find another reason to try and fire me. I'm protected under that. And also it explains undue hardship. Now, it's sort of a vague definition of undue hardship that it gives you on eeoc.gov, but it does state that if it causes any kind of major financial burden or a safety issue, things like that.
Here, I can pull it up for you. There you go.
Perfect.
You can even be specific for it.
So it does kind of go into what those undue hardships are. And so I have brought up to them at one point, I've been doing these things previously and they didn't cause an undue hardship. So I don't understand why now we need to change everything. And their response was always, well, see, but we've changed our policy. And I said, I'm aware of that. And that's why we have, religious exemptions. That's why we have these guidelines put into place by the EEOC. And I think they got tired of arguing with me. But like I had said before, I recorded every single meeting that I had with HR. And the other night, actually, as I was kind of preparing for our interview tonight, I was listening to all my interviews all over again. And I have not heard them since they happened. I don't think I've ever replayed them and sat and listened to all of them. And it's kind of funny because when you do that, you start to pick up on things that you didn't notice at that time. And one of the things I noticed when I was replaying it was a 17-minute long recording. And throughout the whole recording, I kept hearing tapping or like a bumping noise and then tapping again. And it occurred to me, that's them tapping their pen, tapping their foot through the entire 17-minute long discussion that we had. And I thought to myself, that must mean that they were at least a little bit nervous. They were a little bit nervous to be having this conversation. Not that I'm an intimidating person, but I think they were intimidated by the topic because they weren't familiar. They didn't know what my rights were. They didn't know what they are allowed or are not allowed to be saying to me or doing. And I just saw somebody asked, did I tell them that I was recording? I did. That was why they brought in that second person to sit in on my HR meetings.
And yeah, as I recall, when you were telling me the story in the first place as well, you said another interesting thing, which is that the non-HR person was the one who started doing pretty much all of the talking at that point. The moment the HR director realized you were recording, she got super quiet.
She did.
That's like, I mean, to me, I'm just like, again, I'm not a legal person. I mean, I'm getting crash courses here in recent times. But I mean, that right there is just screaming to me in the way of, they know, they absolutely know that they are on thin ice legally with what they are doing.
Yeah, I had that very first meeting with the HR director this year when she was trying to negotiate with me pretty much my religious exemption. And when I brought up that I had recorded the whole meeting that we had regarding the testing the prior year, I've never seen the color drain from someone's face so quickly as when she realized I was recording. And then every meeting that I had with HR after that, this other woman sat in on. And like Catherine was just saying, after that initial meeting, when I told her I was recording, it was primarily the other woman who was not an HR person who did most of the talking.
I wonder if that's even a problem as well, because I mean, she had nothing to do with HR. She had nothing to do with your chain of command. She had nothing at all to do with this situation. And it makes absolutely no sense why she would be there and how. I mean, I would have to imagine there'd be some legal ramifications in that. Just that alone, something is extremely suspicious.
Yeah, it was very fishy. One of the meetings in particular, when they were trying to negotiate my religious beliefs with me, and I had to explain that they are non-negotiable, they kept bringing up, because I said anything that violates my bodily autonomy goes against my religious beliefs. And I have a tattoo, and that was one of the things they said was, well, if that goes against your religious beliefs, bodily autonomy, well, but you have a tattoo. And I said, that didn't violate my bodily autonomy. That was voluntary. No one forced me to do it. I wasn't being threatened by the loss of my job or bribed into letting someone give me a tattoo. It wasn't a condition for me to come to work every day. And they were a little confused. And so I responded to that by going on Google, and I Googled the definition of violating bodily autonomy, and I put it in an email, and I said, there seems to be some confusion over what this means. hopefully this helps to answer any of your questions. Because at this point, I was done being nice. I was still being professional, but I was really done being nice at this point because I knew that they were going to try to fire me. And the idea of it really devastated me because I loved my job. I loved what I did. I had been there for a long time. I had built up a little bit of seniority. I had a great, relationship with all my coworkers. I had not been in trouble. I had not had any issues prior to this. And so all of this had started just because I didn't want to get a shot or let them, take my blood or wear a mask. And so you kind of have to start accepting the fact that you're not going to be here much longer. You're just not. And even if you win this battle, what's it going to be like being there after this? Because at this point, we had gotten so far into the, their new policy that it was really causing a division now between employees, even in departments. People that my department used to work really well with, it was starting to cause division because, well, some of those girls over there, they haven't taken the shot, and they don't always wear their mask, or they just caused a lot of animosity that we never had before. And so even if I had won this battle and stayed, it was not going to be a pleasant place to work anymore. I would not love it the way that I had previously. And so I had to start job hunting because I knew that, at this point they had extended our deadline to get the shots to September 30th. And we're talking now 2 weeks before that deadline. So I had started interviewing for places and, talking to friends, hey, do you know anyone that's hiring? And at this point, the Biden mandate had not yet been announced. So there were still, most places didn't have anything like this in place. A lot of my coworkers were going the religious exemption route. Just a lot of people, which really surprised me, a lot of people that I never thought would cave and get the shot started caving and getting the shot because everybody was just terrified to lose their job. And I am a Christian. I do believe that God will provide. And so as scary as this might be, and as devastating as it was to me to have to think of leaving, I'm not going to cave. I'm not going to back down to these people because good ideas don't require force. And if you're going to force me to do this, then it's not a good idea. So I started job hunting and I got called into HR again. This was probably a week, maybe a little bit less before the deadline to get the shots. So I get called to HR again. And they tell me, at this point, I had recited everything about EEOC that I could possibly find online to them. I had copy and pasted blurbs. I put a binder together. I made packets for each of them. So that way we could go through it together. I can read it to you. I can show it to you. Since you don't want to investigate this on your own and find out what my rights are as an employee, I will literally read it to you. So it had come down to that. So I did find blurbs about discrimination and retaliation. And one of the things that I did find helpful, it's a little bit different on the EEOC site right now as it was when I had to use it, but they actually had a section that was dedicated to reasonable accommodations specifically centered around COVID. So if you had employees who could not wear a mask or who could not get tested, didn't get the shot, whatnot, it actually gave a little list of things that the EEOC considered to be reasonable accommodations. And some of these things were the same things that we've been doing since day one. Wash your hands, stay 6 feet away from people, daily temperature checks. Another thing they had was a daily or even a weekly, however often they wanted to do it, like a health questionnaire about, are you experiencing, XYZ symptoms? So when I had my second to the last meeting with HR, they said, listen, so sorry, we can't come up with any kind of reasonable accommodations for your situation. And they said, but we're not going to give up. This was on a Friday. And they said, we're going to go ahead and let you take the weekend to think about what you want to do. And if you can come up with any reasonable accommodations, we'll be open to listening to them. We'll meet again on Monday. So you just take the weekend and you think about what could be a reasonable accommodation without causing an undue hardship on the company. And I know that they were thinking they were going to put the ball in my court and I was going to think, crap, I don't know. But I'm like, absolutely, I will do that. Yes, I will be more than happy to come up with some reasonable accommodations. Not knowing I had already done this. I had already collected all my information and I had a printout on it. So I'm like, I will take the weekend. I will let you know on Monday. So on Monday, oddly enough, our HR director, who was fully vaccinated, was out sick. And the other woman who was not HR was there that day. And I went to her and I said, hey, when do you want to have the meeting? Because my goal this whole time, even though I had days where I went home sick to my stomach, even though I had days where I went into work sick to my stomach, because every day it was like this just impending doom of what are we going to do now? What's going to happen today? Am I going to get called into HR again? Are they going to try and corner me again? It was just stress day after day after day of defending myself over, I don't want this shot that you're trying to give me that's experimental, that I personally know people who died after getting. But of course, they don't want to hear it because it's safe and effective. So I went back in that Monday with my binder and all my printouts and all my little blurbs from eeoc.gov. And we had to Zoom call the HR director that was out sick. And, they said, okay, what do you have for us? And I'm like, I'm glad you asked. So I gave them my printouts and I said, on the EEOC website, they actually have a specific section dedicated to reasonable accommodations for those who don't want the shot or who don't wear a mask, so on and so forth. And I said, and here's a list of 5 different things. I believe it was 5 or 6 different things that they consider to be reasonable accommodations for this situation. And I'm like, isn't that great news that there is an answer? We have options even. And so I know that they were getting very discouraged because I'm acting like, isn't this wonderful? And they're thinking, crap. So I was reading off my little sheet and I offered the woman that was in the office, I said, I have a copy for you if you'd like it. And she said, I don't need a copy. Okay, I'll read it to you. That's fine. And so I went down the list and I said, I can do social distancing, hand washing, temperature checks,
symptoms,
the same things that you had everybody doing.
Hold a paper in front of your mouth.
Yep, I brought that up as well. And I kept pointing out to them, I said, the paper I'm even doing is an extra courtesy for you because my doctor says I don't need to do any of that. Now, mind you, we are up to the day that I'm getting terminated. When I'm having this final meeting, they still have not told me yes or no on any of my exemptions. They just keep saying, well, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. So I give them this list of options. Now, one of the things that I had suggested, and I mentioned a little while ago, when COVID first hit, they were allowing most of the people in our building to work from home. Now, a small percentage of those people were still working from home, and another small percentage of those people were being hybrid. So they would be in the office maybe 1 or 2 days a week and work from home the rest of the time. And so that was one of the things I had on there as a reasonable accommodation. Now, I don't want to work from home. The idea would stress me out because it was just too hard and too big of a pain in the butt to do my job from home. It was much easier to do in the office. But I did mention this could be an option. And I had actually brought that up at one of our previous meetings, and they said, that's not realistic. We can't have you working from home. And I said, people who do I took incoming calls, incoming emails. They had people in another department who did the same job, but they did outgoing calls and outgoing emails. And that whole department worked from home for almost a year. And so I said, well, we already did this. And those people were allowed to do it from home. And then I actually started naming specific people's names who not only did it for a year, but who were still currently doing it. And I said, so are you telling me that these people are allowed to do it, but I'm not allowed to do it? And they kept saying, well, this is just temporary for them. This is not a long-term solution. And I said, they've been doing this since March of 2020. And at this point, it is September of 2021. So a year and a half, these people have either been working from home full-time or working from home as a hybrid. But this was not, even a hybrid was not an option for me. It was an option for me in 2020, no longer an option for me in 2021, because it didn't work to their benefit at that point. So I gave them all these ideas and they went through and shot all of them down. And when I asked why, I was basically given, see, but our policies have changed. Back then, we didn't have a shot available. We didn't have, so many people getting sick. And so now that's just not, we had to change our policies and blah, 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 blah. So I said, okay. And I said, well, just so you're aware, because I have valid exemptions for the shot, the masking, the testing. Under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, I am protected. And there's actually a blurb on there on eeoc.gov where it asks if they are required to accommodate your religious beliefs and or medical condition. And it does say yes, so long as it does not pose an undue hardship. And so they kept trying to insist that it would cause some kind of inconvenience to them, some kind of hardship for them. And I said, listen, for the last year and a half, I've been holding a paper in front of my face, which you told me was a reasonable accommodation. You told me that I was exempted from the testing because of my religious beliefs. You told me that you would even accept my religious exemption for the shots because of my religious beliefs. And all of these accommodations that you have made for me previously were all reasonable for the last year and a half. And I said, clearly, they don't pose any kind of undue hardship. And they didn't have anything to say because what could they say? It didn't cause any kind of undue hardship for them. And they knew that. And from what I researched on the EEOC website, if they do try and tell you that it causes an undue hardship, they are then obligated to prove what that undue hardship is. They can't just tell you, oh, well, see, that could get a lot of people sick because we don't know if you have the virus and you or not. Or, it could cost us a lot of money and that was one of the things they tried to tell me was what could cost us a lot of money if you come in here sick and not knowing it and other people catch the virus and we have all these people calling off that are out sick. And I said, okay, well, you do realize that under EEOC, you're required to prove that to me. You can't just tell me that you're afraid of it happening. So I kind of shot down that idea quickly. But I think throughout this whole process, I really threw them off by knowing exactly what my rights were. And I spent hours upon hours, as I said before, reading through everything I could find on the EEOC website. And so I had this final meeting with them, and I basically closed it by saying what I just said. You've been giving me all these reasonable accommodations for the last year and a half, and they clearly don't pose an undue hardship on the company. So there's no reason for any of my exemptions to be denied. And they said, okay, we'll talk about it. We'll let you know. And I said, okay, thank you. And I left. I went to lunch. I came back from lunch and I took a phone call and I could feel somebody walk up behind me. And it was the woman who was not in HR. And she was standing there and I could feel her lingering as I was on this call. And normally when people come over to talk to you, if you're on the phone, they would just walk away and come back in a few minutes or whatnot. Well, she was not leaving. So I knew this was it. I knew it. And so my supervisor had actually walked over and said, hey, do you have a question for her? Can I help you? And she said, oh, no, I'm just going to wait for Kay. So I hung up and she said, hey, can you come with me for a minute? And I said, absolutely. Grab my phone, hit record, put it in my back pocket. So follow her into our CFO's office. And it's our CFO, who is a man, and her. And then they had the HR director on Zoom that was out sick that day. And they sat me down and he just looked at me and said, today is going to be your last day with the company. And I said, oh, okay, so you're terminating me. And he hesitated because I know he was trying to think about, am I allowed to say this? And he said, yes, you're being terminated. And I said, okay, for what reason? And he said, you're being terminated. And I said, you're not going to give me a reason. And he said, no. And I said, okay, thanks. And I got up and I walked out. And I think that they were expecting me to get upset or to argue. And honestly, the best thing, in my opinion, that you can do if you're in that situation is not to cause a scene. Don't get upset, because then they're going to know that they got to you. And I did never want them to think that. So I went back to my desk, and I had already, because I knew this was coming, I had already started packing up my stuff 2 weeks prior, and taking things home. So I went back and I started packing things up. And the woman who's the not HR lady followed me back to my desk. So I start packing things up. And she at some point had walked away, and we had an IT director who walked over, just happened to walk over and was talking to one of the other employees in that aisle. So I finished packing up all my things. I get my jacket, I get my purse, and I'm just standing there waiting, thinking she's going to come back to walk me out because I have my security badge and everything that I'm going to have to turn in. And she wasn't coming back. And so the IT director looked at me. He's like, did you need me for something? And I was like, do you know where she went? And he was like, oh, I'm not sure why. And I said, oh, well, they just fired me, so I need someone to walk me out. Like, do you walk me out? How does this work? I've never been through this before. And so I kind of felt bad for him because he sort of went, well, yeah, I can walk you out. So he took my badge and he walked me out. But and I was 37 when I got terminated. That's the first time in my entire life, even as a teenager in high school, that I've ever been terminated from any position before. And so it was that whole day was very gut wrenching. That whole last month that I was there was very gut wrenching. And I think at first I was very determined to fight, and I was going to fight. That was going to be the hill I died on. And I was not going to back down. And like I said, I am a Christian, and I do believe that God will provide. So I got fired, and I didn't have any solid leads yet on any other jobs. And so I kind of came home and told my husband, like, I'm home early. So he knew what happened. And obviously I had told him this whole time what was going on. And so I took a week off of work, continued job hunting. And it was kind of nice because I thought, okay, well, it's fall. I like fall. It's my favorite season. I can do some things. I can do some crafts or go hikes or go on hikes, whatever. And so then I kept thinking, like, okay, everybody kept asking me, have you filed for unemployment yet? You got to get your unemployment, which would be the logical thing, I guess, to do. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I just want to be done with them. And I want them to know I don't need your damn money. And I wanted them to know that I wasn't going to take their money and I wasn't going to go down the unemployment route. So I thought, I'm really just I have some savings put away. I'm going to use that if I need it. My husband's still working and he can pick up overtime, so we can get by for a little while. And I realize not everybody can do that. I was just very blessed to be in a position where I happen to have some savings. And so that was going to kind of be my plan. I'm not going to file for unemployment, and I'll take the next month and I'll job hunt and I'll just enjoy the season. And I've been a member of the Ohio Stands Up group almost since it was born. I think I joined in July 2020 is when I found the group on Facebook. And so I made some friends through there. I'd attended various events in the past and met a lot of the people. And a few of us actually have a group chat on Facebook. And so, I had explained to them through all of this happening, what was going on, and, step by step, everything that happened to me, I told them about. And so one day I'd been kind of busy, hadn't been on Facebook very much, and came home that night before dinner, got on Facebook, and I have like all these messages. The group chat was blowing up with, hey, have you found another job yet? You need to call Jason. Here's his number. Get a hold of Jason. You've got to call Jason. And then I have a message from Jason. Hey, Kate, call me. You've got to get a hold of me. I've got a lead for you. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. And so I called him, and he said, Ohio Stands Up has been looking to work with a new attorney that's local. And, I spoke with him today. His name is Warner Mendenhall. And, we're discussing, what our goal is and how we could help him and how he can help us. And he mentioned that he was looking for an administrative assistant. And did I know anybody? And he goes, I automatically thought of you. And he's like, so I told him about you. Call him tomorrow. And I'm like, done. So I actually Googled his name that night, and I found the firm's website, and I emailed him my resume without even calling him first. I think I emailed him my resume at midnight. And I called him the next day, and I just said, hi, I heard you might be looking for somebody, I'm a friend of Jason's, and he told me you might need help. And I believe my interview went, how old are you? And I said, 37. And he goes, okay, I don't know. You have any kids? And I said, no. And then he was kind of like, well, I don't know. I'm not good at this. I never know until you come in here. And he said, well, how much money are you looking for? And I told him how much, and I was just kind of throwing a number out. There was about what I made at my old job. So I said, this is what I'm looking for. And there was this long silence. And so I'm thinking, oh crap, was that too much? And then he's like, done, you're hired. When can you start? And so I said, well, I'm kind of busy tomorrow, but the following day I can come in, And so I am now the administrative assistant to attorney Warner Mendenhall, who is representing Ohio Stands Up. We are helping to lead a lot of the lawsuits against the various colleges throughout the state regarding their masking and their vaccination requirements. We are also leading the fight with the Smucker's employees against Smucker's to help them out. So anybody who needs help, I am absolutely here for you. I have been through this personally. I got fired before it was cool. I was going through this before there were any kind of OSHA mandates in place, before there was any talk about this in the government. And so I completely understand the anxiety and the fear that you feel going into work every day and not knowing what today is going to bring. How am I going to get treated today? I have a girl that I've been helping, that our firm has been helping. I talk to her all the time, actually. And her employer has gone as far as isolating her in a closet and saying, well, this can be your office now. You're no longer allowed to interact with clients anymore. And I mean, it's just hearing some of these stories about how people are being treated by their employers. And these are employers that they've, a year ago, they loved working there and they were so proud to work there. And it's heartbreaking to hear these stories and just talking to these people every day. But I've absolutely been in your shoes and I know what it's like. And at some point you really do have to sort of accept the fact that this is it. Unfortunately, they don't care about how long you've been an employee. They don't care about all the years of service you've given them. They feel that they're being backed into the corner by the government, and therefore they're passing that on to you. And I think the most important thing that you can do is research your rights, learn what your rights are, learn what their rights are, and also understand that this is new to all of us, but it's also new to a lot of them. And so when you are able to have a conversation with them and assert your rights, and when you are able to use their ignorance to your benefit, that can be such a big difference. Like I said, when I listened to those meetings that I had with HR, and I'd never picked up on it at the time, probably because my adrenaline was going in those meetings and I was just so anxious and, frustrated and whatnot in that moment, to sit there and hear the constant tapping of a pen that they were doing and the constant foot tapping and just these little things that I hadn't picked up on at the time. Those are very clear signs that they're feeling anxious and scared, and they're just as afraid to have this meeting with you as you are. So the more confident you can come off and the more educated you are about your rights, the more that's going to intimidate them. And I think everybody can use their ignorance as to your benefit right now. And I think that's the most important thing, is to educate yourself, look for answers on your own. Of course, everybody wants to call an attorney and because you're frantic and you don't know what to do. And it seems like they're breaking these laws, and
they are.
With this. And they are.
Yeah, they are.
And so, you're terrified because it's, the only thought that goes through your head is, how can I get away from this? What can I do? And so what I found out from working for Warner is we do have resources that we can use before we have to consult with an attorney. And a lot of people, if you're losing your job, you probably don't have the money for an attorney. But you do have some resources.
Not getting into it. I mean, even if you do have the money, I mean, there are so few attorneys able to do it that I mean, I know how overwhelmed Warner is right now, and it is a thing of not all of the good cases even can be taken. It's just too much. It's just too much.
It really is, and we are overwhelmed. There are other attorneys out there. In fact, Warner just set up a website. It is healthfreedomcouncil.com. And he's compiled a list of attorneys. We have representation in all 50 states. So even if you have family members or friends who are in other parts of the country who might be going through the same thing, and obviously the laws can vary state by state, they can visit healthfreedomcouncil.com and find an attorney that is willing to help them. And these are all people that our firm has been in touch with, and we do know that they will be able to help you, or at least give you some advice.
Well, we're still working on that. I mean, I've been helping Warner a little bit with that website there, and right now the list of attorneys there are people, attorneys who have taken the NVICP vaccine cases. So right now, at this point in time, we're not dealing with the NVICP yet, happily, but we do have a list of lawyers that I don't know, it's not yet up on the website, that we do know specifically are COVID specific. The long list that we have now is not COVID specific, but since they've already taken vaccine cases, there's a chance that they might help. But we do actually have a list that needs to get put up there.
If anybody has any questions, you can always email me. My direct email at the office is KAY @ Warner, WARNER, Mendenhall, mendenhall.com. And I can at least talk with one, or I can try and get you in touch with somebody if you need help. One of the things I started to talk about was you do have some options before you have to go the attorney route. If you visit eeoc.gov, they actually have a way where you can file a complaint with them. And there's also the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, which is another resource that you can use. All you have to do is Google it, really, Ohio Civil Rights Commission. You can also file a complaint with them. One, I believe, is at the federal level.
Yes. So the EEOC is at the federal level, OCRC is at the state level. And if you file with one, you automatically file with the other. So if you file with the OCRC, it automatically is filed with the EEOC and vice versa, yes, as far as I understand. So
I think the EEOC is a standalone.
Yeah.
But OCRC, if you file with OCRC, it is a dual filing. So it does file with EEOC as well. So that was the route that I took. I filed a complaint with the OCRC against my previous employer for religious and medical discrimination because they did not officially accept any of my exemptions. And they kept trying to make me wear a mask after I had told them and shown them my medical condition. So I did file with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. And this is a new process for me. I've never had to do this before. So what I did was I went on to the OCRC website, and they have kind of like a little form that you fill out, and then you print it out. You have to sign it and have it notarized. So I did that. And then you actually mail it to your local Ohio Civil Rights Commission office. And when I initially did this, I thought, okay, it's the government. It's probably going to be 6 years before I even, hear anything back from them. But to my surprise, I was probably about 2 to 3 weeks at the most after I had signed my form and sent it in. And I got a response back that my case had been assigned to somebody and that they were going to investigate. And they did ask me for a copy of my doctor's note. And also I had to have my doctor sign, a form basically saying that, yes, she really does have a medical condition that prevents her from wearing a mask. So I did get all that, and I sent it back to them. And I just sent it back to them, I think, last week. And so right now I'm just sort of waiting to find out what's next. I believe the next step is going to be something along the lines of mediation. I know that employers do not want to have any kind of hearing or be investigated with these complaints. So a lot of times they will want to resolve it through mediation. And obviously, I'm not going to want my old job back. But one of the options can sometimes be something financial. I don't know if they just pay you for your, the time that you were unemployed. I'm not sure how that works yet. But I believe that's going to be the next step. Is they'll probably assign us a mediation date. And we'll kind of sit down at the table with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission representative that's handling my investigation. And we'll kind of go through that and find out what kind of resolution we can come to. I do know if there is no resolution and we do have to go to a hearing, they will actually be investigated by the OCRC, which is a huge burden on the company. And so many of them do try to avoid that at all costs because what they do from what I understand is the OCRC can actually go into their building, they can interview people, they can, request records or documents or whatnot from them. And that's a huge burden. And so they will try to avoid that at all costs, from what I understand. So, and
also attorney fees.
That as well. Yeah, they have to pay their attorneys to defend them in these situations. So definitely, if you're in a situation where you can't hire an attorney, or maybe you don't have enough people that would want to join in to kind of split the cost for an attorney, it could be a good option for you just to file a complaint with the OCRC or EEOC.
Definitely do it, because the thing about it is that both of those systems, the EEOC and the OCRC, are required to investigate this. Mm-hmm. And they are required to investigate it for you. You do not pay for that. We do in your taxes and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you file this for free and they have to go and investigate it. And all of the burden is on your company that's been mistreating you. Now, I do want to talk about a couple of things. I mean, like I said earlier, I've been getting a crash course in the law over the last couple of months, even in employment law and that kind of stuff. And I mean, a lot of your story there as well talks a lot about what they knew very early on that they were dealing with a potential EEOC or OCRC violation. And what they were doing with you, where they were doing this sitting down with you and talking with you and all that kind of stuff, this is one of the key components for having a complaint about religious, your religious rights being violated, is they have to have you have to have an interactive discussion. Yes. It has to be you talk to them, they talk to you. There's got to be a discussion. So if you're in a situation right now where there's no discussion, that's great, because they are violating your rights. So, and especially record all this as you have done. You any talking, any emails, any physical documents, everything. Keep it all, because especially in this instance where they were doing pretty well with you in the way that they did this interactive process for trying to figure something out, even if they were like, well, what they tried to do to you, which was, well, we can't accommodate you. We're just gonna, okay, you give us a few things and we're just gonna, excuse me, we're gonna say, oh, well, that's not good enough. It's too undue hardship. And you really with it. It was, I love your story, because you just stuck them every which way. But so long as they try to do it, then they can get out of the punishment situation. But having that backup of, oh, the EEOC says that these are the things that are reasonable, that really stuck them. I mean, I really think that you've got such an awesome case there with the EEOC that, I think they're going to mediate. And as far as I understand, this can be tens of thousands of dollars that they would have to pay you in order to make you go away.
Yeah, I don't go away very easily.
But that's the important thing. So, I mean, as you talked about there, and I think this really needs to be brought home as well, especially as we're watching what's going on right now. Mm-hmm. We have gone so far down this path of insanity in businesses and stuff like that. At this point in time, everybody really, if you're in a company that is not really standing up for your rights and saying, no, we're not going to do this to our employees, you really need to take a moment and really consider your options in terms of, okay, if they're going to do this, don't try to convince yourself, I hope they won't do it. No, okay, if they do it, what will I do?
Yeah.
And the other important thing is to plan for it there, and to understand that these systems are in place, that you can get some money out of the situation for that transitionary period. Mm-hmm. Because that's the other thing that I mean, I don't know it, you didn't know it, and we're not used to this whole system, and what protections there really are for us. And so everything that was done to you and is being done to thousands upon thousands of people, tens of hundreds of thousands of people right now, is just different techniques of intimidation.
Yes.
And exactly what you described, that nauseous feeling of anxiety every single day to just beat you down, to make you submit, and to make you feel insecure.
Yep.
That's all designed to just get you to submit. And so long as you can do what you did, which is, I mean, you didn't have a clue.
Oh, I had no idea.
Any of this. So, I mean, people, a lot of these kinds of stories are ones, well, this person is knowledgeable. This person is stronger than I could ever be. I could never do such a thing. But that is not true. I mean, and also in terms of me as well. I mean, everybody sees me as, being super confident and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, what happens is you start out confused and I don't know what I'm doing. And you look into it, and the more you learn, the more you read, the more you understand of the actual situation, the actual rules, the data, whatever it is. As you learn more about it, it gives you more strength in your position. And when you are standing in a strong position, you can push back like Kay did. Mm-hmm. You can sit there confidently and say, no, that's not, no, just No, and it becomes easier that way. I see a lot of it when people are talking to me. This lack of self-confidence there in terms of, I don't know, do they have the right and all that kind of thing. And really, yes, I mean, having an attorney at your back and all that kind of stuff is it definitely makes you feel secure and stuff. But at the same time, you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
You really can, just by education, just by knowing what they can and cannot do, doing what you did, record it.
Yes, absolutely, record it. That scared them to death when they found that out.
Play it back, though. Play it back where you heard the key words. You heard exactly the key words where they had to do this interactive process. They had to use the word undue hardship. They were trying to establish that they followed the official rules.
Yes. And
then you came back and knew how to counter it simply because you listened, you paid attention, and then you went and you Googled it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the thing. This is not super complicated stuff, but it does require every individual in this position to go out and do it.
Yeah, I mean, knowledge really is power, and it does intimidate them when you know what you're talking about. And I think the biggest thing is, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of them. Don't let them intimidate you. If anything, try and intimidate them right back.
Yes.
That's exactly what I did. And it does work. Yes, I got terminated, but you know what? They had to keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I gave them a run for their money.
And you're going to win.
And in the end, when I proved to them that I've given you several accommodations that have been reasonable for this entire last year and a half, they clearly didn't cause an undue hardship. I took away every single last argument that they could have used against me. And that's why when they terminated me, they couldn't give me any reason, because there was no reason other than I became a thorn in their side, and they didn't want to deal with me because I knew my rights, and they wanted somebody who was going to just comply and go back to work. And that was all they were looking for. But I mean, even during the mask mandates, when Governor DeWine issued that for the grocery stores and the gyms, and I, that entire time, did not have a mask on my face, not once, not one single time. My husband and I went to the grocery store, no problem. We did have to switch grocery stores because Giant Eagle became a mess, but we went grocery shopping, no problem. We found a gym that welcomed us in, no problem. Nothing was ever said. We went out to eat. We went to the movies. I mean, we lived our lives normally. And it was just a matter of walking in confident with no mask on. And that was all it took. And, some places did have their, the door checkers or whatnot. And a lot of times all they would say to you is, would you like a mask? No, thank you. Walk right in and do my shopping, or walk right in and get seated at my table. All you have to do is say, no, thank you. And I there were companies where I did actually Google their corporate policy on what the masks were. And a lot of places, they just followed the state mandates. And so there was a point in time where I had actually, in fact, I did this for Black Friday shopping, because I'm like, I am going shopping. This is not going to stop me. I'm not wearing my mask. And so I had printed out the actual state of Ohio mandate, and I highlighted all the exemptions. And I carried that with me in my purse. And anytime anybody stopped me, if I needed it, it was there. And I could recite back to them. I knew what section it was. I knew what line it was at the time. I could recite all of it back to them verbatim, but I didn't really need to. I had one interaction at a grocery store that involved them calling a manager over. And I pretty much recited to the manager what the mandate was. And I recited to them what their corporate policy was, because I had already researched it, and kind of shut her down. So other than that, I mean, my husband and I, we lived normally that whole time. And we went out to dinner at various places, went shopping, went to the movies, went bowling. I mean, never had an issue. It's just a matter of being confident. Don't let them bully you. Absolutely don't let them bully you. And don't be afraid to stand up for yourself.
And specifically, I think one of the key things, because, we hear that a lot, don't let them bully you, don't, stand up for yourself and all that. But I mean, that is often a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? I mean, some people are just, I'm a nice person. I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. It bothers me to do that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think really the way we do that in this particular instance is exactly that. Know what you did right there. Okay, before I go into a situation, I need to know exactly what that situation is. I know that they might do this, and don't walk in with that kind of cowering. And this is businesses at the moment aren't a problem for the most part, but in Ohio, at least, other places different, but with your company as well, think about it now. Don't wait until they're dragging you in. Think about it now in the way of, if my company goes insane, what are my plans? Let me just know kind of what are my rights and where do I, if I know this ahead of time, when you get confronted by it, if you get confronted by it, you can be like Kay and just say no. And that scares them, and it should scare them. And it's so important to do this. It's so important to know this stuff just internally and be ready before it happens. And that's really the key part, is before it happens, look now and know that this is most likely going to be happening to you or around you if over the next months, as whatever is going to happen more nationally or statewide.
And I just want to quickly give a shout out to, I know that there are so many people out there who are, like you were just saying, they're a nice person and they don't want the confrontation, and, you know, they just want everybody to be happy, and, you know, they hate what's going on and it scares them. And all these people who are normally very timid and normally avoid confrontation, I just want to give you a shout out, because I have met so many of you who are like this, who I have seen yelling at grocery store managers and, you know, demanding that they honor your rights. And I am so proud of all of you. My sister actually is one of those people who is normally sweet and polite and everybody loves her because she's so nice. And she was yelling at a Mark's manager one day over buying stamps and whether or not she had to put the mask over her ears or not. And I'm like, I am so proud of you. I never could have pictured her doing that. But there are so many people out there that are like that, who this whole time, this has really just pushed them to the edge. And kudos to you for standing up for your rights. Absolutely. That's
yeah. And you don't even need to yell at this as well. As I mean, no. if you know what your rights are, you can do as you did, pull out the sheet and just say, and done. No conversation necessary, just simply, but you have to dig in and know it. And as you, I mean, I didn't know it. I've never looked at the EEOC. I will admit it. I haven't looked at the EEOC site. I don't have a job, so not really much point to it for me. But just sit and read and just let it sink in, and know what to be prepared for if they start springing it on you. Because if they do start springing it on you, you can be ready. You won't be intimidated by the very, very large woman who has no business being in your meetings, and you can be like Kay. And I think in this environment that we are currently in, with the OSHA mandate still, you know, it's not gone. It's just a stay. It's got to go back to the lower court. Same with the CMS mandate. It is not stayed, but it's also going back to lower courts. Where will it end? We don't know. It's going to take, I don't know how long for them to work through it all, but it's still all up in the air. And there are a lot of businesses like the one that Kay used to work for that are still going to go through with it regardless of what happens with those mandates. And you need to really know ahead of time, think through it yourself already, and start considering other options. Because are you going to, you know, submit? First of all, you can submit. Or if you are going to fight, know that the situation is not going to improve. If they're going to force it without being forced, it's probably not going to be a very comfortable situation anymore. Or what options you have outside of the specific situation. And the good news is, because of all this madness, there are opportunities that never existed before. Absolutely never existed before, even for healthcare workers, because again, the CMS mandate is very specifically, it's a CMS mandate. I do know of actually several different groups of people who are in the healthcare field who are working at exactly that. They're not taking insurance. They're not taking Medicare, they're not taking Medicaid, and they're working out in this right now process of how do we build hospital systems, insurance systems, all those kinds of things that exclude that. And those things are coming up. They're trying to figure it out. And there's going to be an alternate economy in that. So if you are a healthcare worker, it's not hopeless. It really isn't. It's just that you've got to change your mindset into something else and know it ahead of time, I think is the key point. All right. So I mean, we've been on here for a while and stuff, and I just loved your story, and I'm so glad that you come on and tell me about it first of all, and tell it to everyone else here too. And is there anything else you'd like to finish out with here?
I'm going to give Ohio Stands Up another plug. I'm also going to be at the event on January 22nd along with my law firm. And so I hope to see you guys all there. I look forward to meeting some of you, and I look forward to hearing some of your stories. And I hope that me sharing my story with you maybe gave you a little bit of comfort, or at least a little bit of hope that it's not the end of the world. And yes, it sucks, but there are other things out there, and you could end up in a much better place than you were before.
Yeah, and I was told in the middle of this whole conversation here that I think they've got maybe a dozen tickets left.
Oh wow!
So yeah, I mean it's gonna be packed. So if you are thinking about it, yeah, move fast, because I don't think there's probably going to be a waiting list situation again. So
wow,
yeah, it'll be fun.
It will.
All right. Well, thank you again, and thank you everyone for watching. It was a lot of fun. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you for having me.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.